I just don't know where our audio is. Well, it's certainly high enough.
Hello, I'm Matthew Cook, and I am the grandson of Alan Cook. And I want to thank the Southwest Manuscriptors for having my brother and I on to speak today. So I hope you enjoy my presentation, and I will share my screen here.
What's happening?
Chatting.
Okay, so oops, excuse me, sorry about that.
And while we're getting started, if we can ask everybody who's not presenting to mute themselves, and then that'll allow the presentation to go more smoothly. Thank you.
Yes. So as I said before, my name is Matthew Cook. I am a professional actor, singer, and organist, originally from Fairfax, Virginia. I did my undergraduate work at Pomona College out in Claremont, California, and I got a BA in music and a minor in economics. And as my grandfather said a little bit earlier, this fall I will be attending the University of Southern California, pursuing a Master of Music in Vocal Arts. And part of my pandemic experience has been that I have trained to be a voice actor, and the two biggest things that I've done have been narrating audiobooks and then also starting a podcast. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I encounter writing in both of those areas. And so first I'm going to talk about audiobooks, and what you can see up here on the screen is a sampling of some of the books that I've done. The very first one was East of the Wall, which was my grandfather's book, which I did about 10 months ago or so. I get the overwhelming majority of my work from the Audiobook Creation Exchange, or ACX, which is run by Audible and is a direct pipeline to Audible, though it distributes titles to other marketplaces as well. And one of the very first things that I learned about narrating audiobooks is that the book is written for the eye, not the ear. And so sometimes things that come across perfectly well when read are less clear, or sometimes don't work at all when someone is listening to the audiobook version of this. And the most obvious example to me is in nonfiction books that contain graphs, charts, or images that help further the understanding of the narrative. Of course, when you're listening to the audiobook version, you can't actually see the graphs since you're just listening. And I encountered this particular issue while I was narrating this book, E-Commerce Power: How the Little Guys Are Building Brands and Beating the Giants at E-Commerce by Jason G. Miles. And it was a nonfiction book with graphs, charts, and images, and they were included in nearly every chapter. And so what I did is I reached out to the author, Jason, and what we decided to do was create a companion PDF, which Audible allows authors to upload along with the book. And so we put all of the necessary images and whatever on the PDF so that the narrator has access to those during the the audiobook. And so to illustrate how we did this, let's take a listen of a sample from Chapter 9 of the audiobook here. Chapter 9. Decide where to sell. When the world changes around you, and when it changes against you, what used to be a tailwind is now a headwind, you have to lean into that and figure out what to do, because complaining isn't a strategy. Jeff Bezos. Where do you sell online? In this chapter, we'll tackle that vital question. You've already heard our e-commerce journey, from starting on a large marketplace, eBay, to shifting to our own website, PixieFair, built on the Shopify platform. That was our path. Yours will be different. What I know after helping over 30,000 students. The path that is right for you is going to be unique for your situation. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. I can promise you no two people approach this topic the same way. The e-commerce life cycle. there is a natural progression with niche brand e-commerce work. I call it the e-commerce life cycle. You can find a diagram of the e-commerce life cycle in the companion PDF, Chapter 9, Image 1. It has 4 phases, and each one creates unique challenges. They are: 1. The testing phase. When you're exploring whether the brand and product are going to be viable. In this phase, you want to conduct the smallest tests you can to prove the concept inexpensively. 2. The growth phase. This begins when you have a proven product and brand. The question isn't whether you can sell it, but how much you can sell and how to invest in scaling up. 3. The niche leadership phase. This phase begins when you have beaten the competition and secured your leadership position in the niche. In this phase, you begin to operate very differently than when you are just starting. 4. The exit phase. This is where you either sell your company or delegate or automate the day-to-day duties so you can treat the business like passive income. The testing phase. What to do when you're just starting out. We recommend you start your e-commerce journey by testing your product on an established e-commerce marketplace. You want to go where the biggest group of your ideal customers are already buying. The most obvious choice is Amazon, but there are several other options. You'll have to research them and decide which one is right for you, given your niche and product. You can find a graph listing the most significant marketplaces by the percentage of visitors, according to Statista, in the companion PDF, Chapter 9, Image 2. While you can't sell on Target.com, and so what you heard there was that we altered the text a little bit because obviously in the prose it doesn't say please find the image in the companion PDF, and so that was a collaborative effort between the author and me to try to figure out how to best negotiate each of those obstacles. And you'll notice that earlier I said that we included all necessary images in the PDF. Of course, some of the images are there for purely illustrative purposes, or they're not actually referenced in the book itself, and so we left those out to not, in order for the PDF to not become super long and overly cumbersome for the listener. Another problem that arose from that particular book was that the author included a whole lot of URLs from the text, and some were relatively straightforward and easy to narrate, like Fiverr.com. But then there were others, kind of like this one from Chapter 1, https://hbr.org/2015/10/a-hyphen-tool-hyphen-2-hyphen-you-hyphen-for-hyphen-steps. And so obviously that's very cumbersome to narrate and would be very inappropriate to include in the audiobook. And so what we did was we created a separate page in the back of the PDF for all of the links that are included across the entire book. And I think that worked very well. Regrettably, I don't have the PDF to show you, as it was the author who worked on that particular aspect of the title, and I never actually had any part in creating the PDF itself. And so, while fiction books usually don't have those same type of images that nonfiction books do, that doesn't mean that they come without their own obstacles and challenges. The book that I finished this past week, which is called How to Kill a Dragon, Heir of Dragons, Book 1 by J.A. Cullican, is a good example. While there is a third-person narrative in the book, you can actually hear the characters' inner dialogues, specifically the two main characters, Minx and Caleb, who are pictured on the cover art. The trick is to be able to distinguish between the thoughts and the spoken dialogue using variations in the character's voice. And so I wanted to play for you the beginning of Chapter 4 of the audiobook, where you'll first hear Caleb's thoughts and then his spoken dialogue a little bit later on. The dragon watched the fey huntress knock another arrow and couldn't help chuckling to himself. What does this girl think she's doing? She could fire 100 arrows. It won't make a difference. Amused at her struggle and impressed at her tenacity, the creature ceased flapping its wings and touched down in the clearing with spectral grace. The Fae, wide-eyed and shaken, lowered her bow by a few degrees, unsure of how to proceed. She proved even more confused when Caleb shed his dragon form and shifted. Where only moments ago a monolithic fire dragon had stood, there was now only a young man in the smoldering clearing. Smiling wryly, he probed her wild gaze with his yellowish eyes, making a little motion with his hands intended to get her to drop her weapon. She lowered the bow, less out of obedience to him than out of pure shock. "Well, that wasn't very neighborly of you," he called out, hands on his hips. "Is that how you treat all the visitors who come into your lands?" The Fae Huntress said nothing, still stunned at his sudden transformation. And so there you heard another example of how we overcame a bit of an obstacle in the book. And of course, this is very important because inner thoughts are often very different from what people actually say in real life. And these characters develop feelings for each other, and certainly they don't want to say those feelings out loud, but they'll think them. And so now I want to move on to the podcast realm where I'm actually a writer. This is my podcast here, Trivia Over Tea, which is a quiz show podcast. I started it back in February. And in each episode, I have two of my friends come on the show and answer trivia questions written by usually my brother and me. And since the contestants don't see the questions in front of them, I have to make sure that the questions are short enough to be recalled and that they're very concise and clear, and they're able to guide the contestant toward the right answer. And sometimes I don't succeed at this, and my friends have to ask me to repeat the question or ask for clarification. Fortunately, I have ultimate editing power and can usually edit out my mistakes. But in this case, we obviously all fall into the trap sometimes of writing for the eye rather than the ear. And on my podcast, we have different rounds of questions, and some of them end up being multiple choice, and some of them end up being non-multiple choice. And you have to write the questions differently, as they are supposed to lead the contestant in a slightly different direction. And so for multiple choice questions, they can be a little bit more open-ended because I give 3 answer options to help narrow the scope. And so here's an example of a question from our April 28th episode. In February, a study was released showing that what measure in the U.S. had declined in the first half of 2020? A, life expectancy, B, the Gini coefficient, or C, the Human Development Index. Now, the question itself is rather vague. I could have been talking about attendance at sports venues for all you knew. But since I have the options to help guide the contestant, I have the ability to be vague in the question. And the answer to this was life expectancy. The other two measures actually increased in the first half of 2020. This is another example of a vague multiple choice question that we had on our May 5th episode. Which of the following composers was born last? A, Ludwig van Beethoven, Johannes Brahms, or C, Hector Berlioz? And the answer to that was Brahms. Brahms was born in 1833, Berlioz is in the middle at 1803, and Beethoven, much older than them, was born in 1770. And then the other part of the show, we have non-multiple choice questions. And in the second round, actually, we have usually 5 questions based on the same topic. And so that's what I want to talk about now. And now these non-multiple choice questions have to be more specific since the contestant does not have the luxury of answer options to guide them. And so I'll give you an example of a 5-question set that we did. Another one from our April 28th episode. One of our contestants got questions about President James Monroe because that was his birthday. And so here they are. James Monroe became the 4th president to be from what southern state? And that, of course, was Virginia. During his presidency, Monroe's tendency to dress in the then outdated style of the Revolutionary War period earned him what nickname? And that's the last of the crooked hats. Third question. Due to national unity following the War of 1812 and the collapse of the Federalist Party, Monroe's time in office is often referred to as the era of what? And that is the era of good feelings. Fourth question. Monroe's estate, Highland, is adjacent to whose Monticello state? And that is Thomas Jefferson. They're both there in Charlottesville, about 2 hours south of where I am. And then for the last question, like Jefferson and John Adams, Monroe died on what date, albeit in a different year? And I'll wait to reveal this answer because I want to talk about this question in just a second. And as you can see, I tried to cover a large part of his life in the questions and have a couple of easier questions like the first one and the fourth one, and then mix in some other ones that were a little bit more difficult. And the fifth question here is a good example of something I like to do with contestants a lot, which is give them a non-multiple choice question that seems crazy, because of course Monroe could have died on any one of 366 possible dates. But I had the clues that Jefferson and Adams also died on this date. And so I hope that the contestant realizes that it must be a significant enough date to ask about in the first place. And also the fact that 3 early presidents died on this same date should lead the contestant to think that it has something to do with the United States history. And in fact, it just so happens that all 3 of them died on July 4th. Adams and Jefferson died in 1826, exactly 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and Monroe died 5 years later in 1831. But in each of these 5 questions, you see how I write the question intentionally specific so that the contestant has a good chance of actually getting the right answer. And so I wanted to play for you a little bit of one of our show. This was our April 7th show, and I'll play just the first couple of minutes here of our multiple choice section. On this show today, we're going to have 4 rounds of questions, each with a slightly different format. And so without further ado, Carter, can you please explain the rules for round 1?
Yes, so round 1 is our first general knowledge round. Each of you will answer 5 questions. Here they're multiple choice, and they're only worth 10 points each.
Alrighty, Margaret, you are up first. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Question 1. On which of the following days does the stock market close every year? A, Good Friday, B, Veterans Day, or C, Christmas Eve?
Oh, okay. I have no knowledge of the stock market, so I expect Russell would be a better person to ask. But given that Good Friday just happened right before we recorded this, I'm going to say Good Friday.
That is correct. It is closed every year on Good Friday. It does not close for
Wow.
Veterans Day, and it has a half day every year on Christmas Eve. However, this year, Christmas Eve falls on a Friday and Christmas Day falls on a Saturday, and so Christmas Eve qualifies as the federal holiday for this year, but only for this year. But Good Friday, the market is closed every year. Question 2. According to ESPN, who holds the record for most hot dogs eaten by a president on opening day with 4? A, Dwight Eisenhower, B, John F. Kennedy, or C, Lyndon Johnson?
Okay, this is a really great stat. I was expecting a large number of hot dogs, but 4 I think I could do. I'm going to go with C, Lyndon Johnson.
That's correct. Yeah, this occurred on April 13th, 1964, with the Washington Senators game at District of Columbia Stadium, which is now RFK Stadium.
Wow.
This is one of my new favorite trivia facts that I found out recently. I can eat far more than 4 hot dogs if I really wanted to. I recall a get-together in 6th grade. I think you were there, Carter, actually, where I ate 6 hot dogs.
I vividly remember this.
Yeah, shout out to Chris DeLong and his family who cooked those hot dogs for me. Anyway, question 3. What company was the first to ever sponsor the Olympics? A, GM, B, Coca-Cola, or C, McDonald's?
I think I'm going to say B, Coca-Cola, because I think that's the oldest company, but I could be wrong.
Well, you are correct. They began sponsoring the games in 1928 and have remained a sponsor ever since. So that's a little bit of a taste of the podcast and how we interact, how the questions interact with the contestants. And so, you know, whether I'm working with audiobooks, podcasts, or something else, I'm working in an oral art form, and so then the writing must align with that style. And it's always an adventure voicing different writing styles, including my own. And there are always new challenges to overcome. So thank you very much for having me today. And now I will pass it over to my brother, Mason.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. I am Mason Cook. I am the brother of Matthew Cook, and I write music. I've been writing music for 6 years now, and recently I've done pieces for the Robinson Marching Band, and very recently, a couple months ago, I premiered a brand new piece for solo bassoon with the talented Alan Savadoff of the Pacific Symphony Orchestra. So my job as a composer is very similar to your job as writers. I have to tell a story. However, I have to tell it in a different way because I don't get the luxury of having words. I have to use sound and sort of different ways of manipulating the sound to fully tell the story. Now, when a lot of you think of looking at music, you probably think of this. This is standard Western style sheet music. It's been one of the most widespread uses of music notation out there. And that's not what we're going to be looking at today. Instead, we're going to be looking at something a little different. This is Logic. It is what we call a DAW in the business, a digital audio workstation. And in here, I can write music. Real quick, this is a track that I actually wrote in the past. In fact, it's what you see right here. This is the sheet music for it. I'll just play it so you can at least get an idea of what of how I write. Just to talk a little bit more about this one in particular, the idea here is that this is sort of a main theme for, or a mock soundtrack I was making a while back. And so this was supposed to be kind of the start of the adventure, or we were going off on quite an adventure here. We have sort of the hook up here, or a very simple idea that this little descending repeating pattern that we actually see appear quite a bit. Appears here, it's over here, it's right over here too. And goes throughout all the different parts. And that's sort of one of our main ideas. Another main idea is once we get to this melody, that becomes our main melody. And that also goes to multiple parts. And we also have this brief, nice little solo here. So all in all, Oh, those are all different things that you can do to tell a story, but this is not the story that we're going to tell. We're going to talk about the story that my brother wanted me to tell, and that's the story of the podcast, Trivia Over Tea. So when he approached me with writing the music for Trivia Over Tea, he talked about how it was a game show, it was a podcast. He wanted it something befitting of the podcast. And so I wrote him this. Let's give it a quick listen. It's a little under 30 seconds. Nice, short, simple. So a lot of my inspiration for this came from past game show themes that I had listened to. Notably, Match Game certainly had a lot of inspiration for this. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Match Game and the Match Game theme, and I actually really like it. It's a well put together theme, and that's because the structure of it has two main parts. You have the first part, which is more stripped down, which is the bass line and some harmonic stuff. And then you have the full thing, which includes the melody and all of the other parts. And so I try to do something very similar here. First, we have a kind of this more stripped down section over here, that involves a build right here with these harpsichords. Now, I'm sure at least a few of you are wondering, because when you look at it from here, it looks like these are all the same notes. When in reality, all these notes are not actually the same. They're different notes. And that's very intentional. Well, this is layering, and this is very common. Go listen to just about any piece of music you can find, and you'll find that this is what they do. You layer more and more parts to build more. You gotta add tension, and this helps develop the idea, because at heart, the idea is just fairly simple idea. And if you heard that over and over again, it would get very, very boring. And so when you repeat something, you have to make it slightly different. And the slightly different thing comes with adding layer, layer. And then we transition to the next section, which is slightly different. And so that helps develop, it really develops our basic melody into something a little bit more. And now we can look at some of the other parts to see how they develop, because we can't just develop melody. We have to develop all the things around it, because otherwise things get a little uneven. So let's look at the bass line, and this is a fairly simple bass line. Very basic, and that's intentional. It gives the melody a lot of room to breathe. This isn't something where the bass is the star of the show. I've heard things where the bass is very much the star of the show. There's quite a few movie and video game soundtracks where that's the case, but this is a game show, and this is something quite a bit simpler than writing for one of those other mediums. And I just wanted something to be, well, similar. Or just very small, and then eventually it also develops right alongside our melody. And finally, let's get to our last element, and that's the rhythm. This is a very basic drum beat, very easy, not much going on here. And it's mostly just there to provide a very solid, stable backbeat. So let's talk about this element right here. This is the something different that we're doing, and this is how we're developing the rhythm, because we're not actually doing anything to this beat. We're just adding a new element, and that's this right here. They're just this nice little hit of the glass marimba. And for those who don't know, a glass marimba is a percussion. It's a giant keyboard where all of the different keys are made out of glass. And so it has very ethereal sound. It's very nice. Hollywood composers adore this thing. And honestly, so do I. It's just a great sound to mess with. And it's very useful. And this is one of those uses. You can have very nice little chime-like chords that have different levels of damper, or they can sustain, and they can just be a solid hit. It's great. Now, let's talk about sort of the sound choices, because that's another big part of this. Because if you don't have the right sounds, it doesn't quite work. And so let's talk about why the harpsichord is right here in the main melody. When I was thinking about this podcast, he came with the trivia over tea concept. I thought something a little bit older, something a little bit more upper class, something sort of business casual, as it were, or something fairly intimate and private. And when I think of all of that, my mind kind of drifted back towards the olden days in Europe, where there would be private parties at various lord castles, where a harpsichordist would be playing in the background. And that sort of sound and vibe definitely, it kind of clicked with me on this, because initially in the draft, and I can open this just so you guys can see, this is where I get all my different patches, which are the different sounds I have, so you can see listed. This sound actually was initially trombones. So just to give you guys a quick listen of what that sounds like. It's different, isn't it? It's much different. Now it's something a little bit more, competitive, a little more of a tournament. And admittedly, I didn't really like it. I mean, I liked it, but I didn't feel like it fit with the vibe that Matthew was going for. And so I opted to go with the harpsichords. And then once you have your main sound down, you have to get sounds that go well with it. Think of it like cooking. And once you know what the main part of your dish is, you want to pair it with different flavors that also work well with it. It's why you don't see a lot of steaks followed up by dark chocolate. Because those two flavors, while they are good separately, together, they can be a little bit confusing. However, when you have a steak and then you compare it with, say, broccoli and mashed potatoes, all those flavors work well together, and thus you have a cohesive dish. And so I had to do the same thing here. For the bass line, I chose very simple string bass. And that's because the bass was a very common accompanying instrument of the harpsichord, and it still is for the very few harpsichordists that are still around. And as far as the kit kind of goes with everything. You can kind of sneak it into the background. And then similar thing with the glass marimba. A lot of percussion can be thrown behind and just about any patch. That's the nice thing about it. There's obviously some exceptions there, but generally speaking, all these sounds work well together, and thus we have one cohesive unit. Now, let's quickly, before we move on to the next thing, I'm just going to quickly touch on this. You probably noticed right here at the end, there was one last additional build, and this was really meant for the end of the podcast. I wanted there to be a fairly conclusive ending here, or that came back to our original home, and I wanted it to sort of give the feeling that the show is over. There's a little bit of tension, but there's release. And the most tension actually comes over here with this very, very dissident chord. And that's intentional so that the relief is a little bit more. And it's little tricks like that that I have to mess with to get the listener to go where I want them to. And then another little trick is below that, I put a lot of motion in those other parts. That way, even though we have a sustained, very, very dissident noise, we're still going somewhere. And it feels like we're going somewhere a little bit faster. And that motion will eventually lead to release. It's all about messing with tension. That is the art of making music. And so once I do that, I adjust the volume and the mix and balance of everything with these sliders right here. And then I was able to send it off. But now we have to talk about where we derived things from it. So this is the transitions. This is, if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear this when he's going from section to section. And so this is the transition. And it may sound a bit familiar. And that's because it's just the bass line and the rhythm from the main theme. And that's so that we still have a cohesive musical idea across the entire podcast. I didn't want to make a dedicated transition theme, that was a completely different idea. I wanted it to connect back to the ideas I already have. We have to keep everything together. And so I just took the bass line, took the rhythm, and then I sped up the tempo a little bit up here. And we have this. Now, I did actually write quite a bit. This is a full 3 minutes of transition. He'll never need that much. But I took the philosophy of better to have more than you need than not nearly enough. So it's at Matthew's discretion how much of this transition he uses and sort of where he wants to start and stop. And overall, I'm actually very satisfied with how I wrote the transition. This is probably one of the faster things I've written in period when it comes to Logic. So the last thing I want to share with you guys and this is a fairly fascinating thing. So this is the theme for a recently held event on the podcast, the Tournament of Champions, where we brought back past winners of the podcast and had them compete against each other. And so Matthew came to me and asked me to do a new theme for the Tournament of Champions, something a little bit more befitting of the conversation. Now you'll notice we're starting out with instruments soloed, and there's a reason for that. So Well, first, I'll show you the unsoloed version. This is what the entirety of it sounds like. However, when I showed that to Matthew, he said that that was a bit too much. And so he needed me to cut it down. So eventually, I cut it down to just this. And see here, still very grand. However, it's not nearly as dense. And, you know, I like it. And so the main thing I'm going to quickly wrap this up. But the quick things I want to bring attention to are timpani pedal. This timpani idea, which is just straight beat quarter notes through the timpani to add a pulse to this. Change of this to the French horn so that we have a bit more of a tournament-y feel. And then we have the addition of this rhythmic trumpet part that is layered, you know, so we can also develop a different harmonic idea. And then unsoloed, we also have some more things to look at, like this giant organ chord, or taking the bass line quite a bit up, and then an additional trumpet line. So there's a lot to unpack here, but the thing that I really like about all of this is that it takes the same idea. It's fundamentally the exact same piece, but it's a different take and it's developed differently. It's just using the same material, but in different ways. And that's really the core of music and writing music. You have to wisely use your resources. You have to know when to develop, what to develop, and how to develop it. And those are all lessons that can be applied to writing as well. Well, if you can safely and smartly utilize your resources, that will produce a great novel just as much as it can produce a great music. And so I thank you all for having me here. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew and Mason. That is, I mean, from your grandfather's writing, Matthew, you're narrating, Mason, you're composing. You're quite a eclectic, talented family. All right, I've just reclaimed the host. How does my voice sound? I'm getting feedback. Am I sounding okay? Can anyone?
Yeah, you're
We're getting some
doubled.
feedback.
All right, how do I? Does anyone know how I don't double myself? I'm going to mute. Let's open it up for questions. I'm going to be muted until I can figure out what's happening with my voice, my recording.
There's a bunch of people that are unmuted and you're echoing through them.
Okay, I'm going to open up. I'm going to mute myself and open it up for questions.
Here. Here. Are you opening up for questions?
Okay. All right. I can't say how much I really appreciated hearing how music is put together, Mason. Thank you very much for that. It was really interesting. And Matthew, you're pretty impressive reader. So thank you for that too. I don't have any questions. I just couldn't resist saying how great you both are. Except I always think of you as the kids who went back in time and were doing the bull. Your grandfather wrote it. Alan, do you remember the name of that? What was the name of that one where the kids went back in time?
Yeah, the book is called Dancing with Bulls.
Yes, that was it.
And
Loved it.
Matthew and Mason on a trip to Greece are visiting Knossos Palace, and somehow they are spirited back 4,000 years to the times of the Minotaur and so forth. And what they encounter is dancing with bulls and bull leaping, and they have to participate in that, which of course is very, very dangerous.
Right.
That was Ginger Clark, in case this. So, well,
Who's the little round ball with a little round thing? That's me, the little round ball with the
okay,
Okay,
my
I'll mute
voice
myself.
is sounding a little better, I think. Yes, sounding much better. All righty. Mason, what interests me too, I have a player piano, and I know this is true for like music boxes as well. How the music has those little cutouts that look exactly like the pattern on yours, to where the air would go through. For I guess it apply for both the music box and as well as the player piano. Doug, you're shaking your head. Do you know about?
There. Can't raise hands.
Well, I'd like to raise my hand. I don't know how we queue up. Are we supposed to be
I don't
going?
need that.
Go ahead, Janice, and then I'm going to mute myself again.
Okay, thank you. If you want some, do we have your email, fellas? Could you give us your email in the chat?
Yeah.
That would be
Yes.
great. I just want to say, Matthew, you're very handsome, but I would suggest that if there's some way you can get contacts or something, and just in this day and age of beauty and handsomeness, that I would suggest you might consider that as part of your presentation. And for some reason, I didn't understand that for your brother. Was he playing all those instruments, and how does he actually record what he recorded? Is he there? Where is he?
Yeah. So there are multiple ways you can do it. Right now, what you heard, I actually wasn't playing any of that. That was the program playing it. However, I can actually go out and record things and take those audio files and put them into Logic. I have done that in the past. However, in that case, I have not. It just didn't happen. That
we have a lot of static echoes going on, so I don't know if anybody can do anything to improve that.
I think it's.
I just want to say we all like to see how it's actually done, and you did a lot of talking about it, but I would have liked to have seen you. I mean, I think Sharon and I were thinking you were playing some instruments. You were not playing any of those instruments?
Nope. None of that was actually me playing. All of
So
that
are
was.
Are they on? Can you give me that? Are they keyboard instruments, or do you have some way to?
I go in and I say what notes I want the different tracks and
Okay, just a minute. I have this phone call and I don't know how to do it.
Oh, James, here. Here.
Ginger, I think some of the feedback might be coming through yours. So if you could
Oh,
mute
no,
yourself, I
really?
think, yeah,
Huh.
I'm not sure why that's happening, but I think that might be the issue.
Yeah, there we go.
Is this better?
Yes.
Much better.
Can you hear me better now too?
Yes.
That was very bizarre. But
Jeri, do you play your piano? Do you play
it's
it?
actually been in storage for quite a few years, but I had it back in Arkansas, my home, and it was a lot of fun. So it's something I didn't want to get rid of. So one of these days I'm going to bring it out when I have my own place again.
Yeah.
So, but it did remind me
It's-
again when Mason
What
showed
instrument? What instrument is that, Jerry?
a player piano.
Right. I have a friend. Right. They spent a fortune rehabbing this player piano. So it's beautiful. It's wonderful.
Mine was in really good condition. We called it the magic piano. So all you have to do
It
is just
is
pump your
magic.
feet. It is a magic, absolutely. But hope to bring it out. But again, Mason, like I say, it was so interesting to have the pattern there. That isn't electronics amazing? Aren't they amazing? I tell you, between the Zoom meeting.
Well, I think somebody called it a music box. I agree. It reminded me of a music box. Now
Right.
now you're Alan has to write a story about a music box and two brothers who were like Sherlock Holmes and what's his name? The other guy.
Well, you can write it. Ginger.
No, where's Dan when you need him? But I could see it being somehow a part of a Sherlock Holmes story, and that Mason, you have to find the right note for things to happen. I don't know if you've seen the Star Trek shows where they do who was it, Moriarty? They interact with him. Oh no, it should be William. Yeah, and Van Gordon. But yes, it's so creative. I love the music. You're gonna have to have some girls in the cute outfits dancing, and some boys in cute outfits too. and make it hot. Make it hot. Yeah. No, I think you may want to jazz it up a little bit because we need all the extra energy we can get here. I think in this group, but I really it was a different style of presentation, and it was good. Now who was it? Alan. Yeah, Alan could write the story because he's in the mysteries. And where's the other kid? What happened to him?
Mason?
Matthew. Matthew disappeared. Mason.
There he is. Yeah,
Mason's there.
Mason
Matthew.
and Matthew. Yeah. He's
Oh
still
no,
here.
William's another guy. He's a science fiction guy too. But I thought
Absolutely.
it was delightful, and yeah. Is this the first time you guys have done this, Mason? Mason?
As in like present or
right.
Yeah.
Share what you do.
Yeah, this is pretty much the first time I've done a presentation like this, really.
You have a nice voice. Have you ever thought of doing like what your brother's doing?
Occasionally.
To each their own, huh? To each their own. But between the two of you, oh my gosh. I personally am and I know your grandparents are too, very excited about having you guys get back out here. So when will that happen? Mason, when will you plan?
They live in Virginia, but he's going to he's going to school back to USA. But he's not. But he's
in
not
August?
physically.
So, and both you guys coming back in August?
Yep.
And will you be staying with your grandparents by any chance? Can we hope?
I'll see them.
Okay.
I believe actually the day that I arrive, I'm moving into my new apartment, in theory, allegedly. But I will certainly go up for them to feed me.
Good. And you have this is an official invitation also to come and meet with us in person when Southwest Manuscripters / Surfwriters starts up again in person. But this has been so exciting to be able to, again, pull people from elsewhere into the group. And the fact that to me, to see this evolution, of the generations, I'm not sure how does your dad write or anything? Does
he doesn't necessarily write for career or anything, but he's certainly, you know, a very good writer. And you know, my mom's a very good writer as well. She was the one who was like editing all of my papers, helping me edit all of my papers, and, you know, pointing out all the little grammar mistakes and whatever. So we come by it honestly.
That absolutely. We need a Cook family presentation. You know, it's like bring them all in and
Well, any more poets in the Cook family?
Yeah, Alan, definitely Alan. Matthew, Mason, you guys, have you written any poetry, or has your dad written any poetry, or?
None as good as my grandfather's.
Yeah, isn't that the
Yeah,
truth?
pretty
Like, why
much.
try to? Yeah, and the limericks. Oh my gosh, his limericks. Absolutely.
I've got a question
go
for
ahead. Yeah.
Matthew, if we have time. Matthew, could you talk a little bit about what if somebody wants to, who has written a book, wants to make an audio version, create an audio version of the book? You know, what's the ABCs? How would they go about doing that?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I have not approached it necessarily from the author's end, but I think a lot of the books that I've done, you know, the author has published on Amazon Kindle, and then from there they're able to, you know, upload it more or less onto ACX, which is combination production and audition platform. And if if you're able to get the book up on ACX, then it's visible to thousands of narrators across the country who, you know, can audition for your book. So
What's ACX?
ACX was the audiobook creation exchange. And that's the platform that I mentioned in my presentation, that I've used to
You
get.
just have a list of the books, or I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, I put out a few of the covers of the books that I've done, and most of them I have auditioned for through ACX, and then the author chose my audition and we worked on it together.
Is this like voiceover? No, it's not voiceover.
Yeah,
or it
yeah,
could be.
more or less, yeah. Yeah, it's voice acting, basically at its source.
But
Yeah,
it's your
I'm
voice.
Huh? Yes, yeah. I'm in my voice studio actually at the moment. We've got a whole bunch of curtains and pillows and foam and all sorts of stuff up on the walls to help deaden the sound, and then this is my microphone that I use. I'm speaking into at the moment. So
I know what I wanted to ask. You had that beautiful picture of the woman, the young lady who was her thoughts were different, but then you weren't doing that because that was a female voice.
No, I do all voices, all characters, male, female, children, animals, everything.
But you did. But when you read her line, you weren't a female voice.
No. I wasn't actually reading her. The sample that I played for you was actually Caleb's thoughts and dialogue. The male character.
Was the man there?
Yes.
Who changed from the dragon?
Yes. Yeah, he's a dragon. This is a fantasy novel. It's a fantasy novel.
Is there any way to hear her voice?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Sure. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, she was so gorgeous. We just want. What does she sound like?
Okay, let me go.
What she was wearing was especially beautiful. Yeah.
I think if I just continue where I'm not sure where I left off here. You?
And I'd love to hear
He called out,
the wimpy,
hands on his
wimpy
hips.
kid one too.
Is that how you treat all the visitors who come into your lands? The Fey Huntress said nothing, still stunned at his sudden transformation. She eyed the burning woods to her back, held onto her bow for dear life. She appeared to be considering a retreat, but the mess he'd caused with his fire blasts had made that a rather risky proposition. He took a slow step toward her, nodding. "I'm Caleb," he said. "And you are?" The girl, slender with long dark hair, gave her delicate shoulders a toss. She was wearing a form-fitting olive garb with steel accents on her calf-high boots and shoulders. Around her wrists were curious bracelets studded with glowing blue stones. "Minx," she uttered, quickly adding, "Not that it's any of your business." The young dragon shifter crossed his arms, plate armor gauntlets clanging as he did so. I don't know about that, he said, chuckling dryly. You attacked me out of the blue. The least you can do is tell me your name. Out of the blue, spat the Fae in evident disgust. You're trespassing on our lands. I was well within my rights to attack you. There's a treaty between our kinds. Or don't you realize that? So that's a little bit of a sample of
And
her
that
voice as
helps
well.
give us a little more idea. And then
Yeah.
they decide if they liked what you did.
Yeah. That was actually part of the completed audio for the book. I just finished that book on Wednesday of this past week.
And Matthew can sing or speak in many different languages, just like Ildi.
Real languages, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Matthew, tell them what you're doing in August.
This summer, I'm going to be in Colorado in Steamboat Springs in an opera young artist program, and I'll be singing.
And do you know when that is? Because that's where my daughter and I went for the Sandhill Crane Festival in September.
Oh yeah,
it's a beautiful place, and you want to go, and if you can go. And what month are you going?
Well, I'll be there in July and August.
You want to ride their inner tubes, so take your bathing suit.
Okay, yeah, I will definitely do that. Yeah, I'm going to be performing in The Marriage of Figaro. I've got all of this to learn. And
in your spare time.
Singing.
And he's playing Figaro.
I'm playing Figaro.
He's got the lead.
Yeah.
Wow.
Singing in Italian.
That is so exciting.
Yeah.
So I've got a few questions. So first of all, Matthew, I'm in grad school at USC right now, so welcome aboard. Although I'm doing my program remotely, so I'm not actually on campus. But I guess a few questions I have for you guys. First of all, like how long does it usually take to record a full audiobook? I imagine you probably have to do a few different takes of things too. And then also, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit. You also mentioned you were an organist. If you could tell us a little bit more about that. I am not an organist, but I'm something of an organ fan / enthusiast. So I always enjoy hearing about people who have that kind of experience. But thank you guys both for your presentation. It was really great. And I learned a lot. I enjoyed all the multimedia that you brought in. It was a lot of fun. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I always love talking about the organ. For the audiobooks, it depends on the length of the book, obviously. What I try to do so that my voice doesn't get too tired is I try to not record more than about 75 minutes of completed audio a day. Now that usually, well, it depends on how many mistakes I make, but that typically takes me about, 3 hours of work for 1 hour of audio-ish. And as I'm going through the book, I try to do everything in one take as best I can. I read the book first ahead of time, so that obviously I know where the characters start and where they're going to be going, and who knows what at what time, all that sort of stuff. Excuse me. And so that helps me prepare so that I can usually just complete everything in one take. Yeah, and so this most recent book that I did was 7 hours and 50 minutes, and so I think I recorded it over the course of, 10 days or so. Some days I could do more or less, depending on my schedule. For the organ, I've been playing since I was, I guess, how old was I? I think I was 17, junior year of high school. And I play in church. I took lessons from the organist at my local church here, and then when I went to college, I continued to take lessons. At Pomona College, we have a fantastic Fisk organ, 66 ranks, 3 manuals, and it's a beautiful, beautiful instrument. Lots of capabilities. There's also a what's the make? It's a Beckerat organ. I can't remember the number of ranks, 30 something, which is the one that I usually played. And then I actually got the chance to play at Disney Hall a few years ago in downtown LA, and that instrument was absolutely amazing, and it really, to be able to make the concert hall shake was great. And I've also played at the National Cathedral here, which is something ridiculous, like 200 ranks, 10,000
You're
pipes.
meaning Virginia? Are you in Virginia?
I'm in Virginia.
And what is a rank?
A rank is a row of pipes, And so you have all the if you look at an organ, you have all of the different knobs on the sides of the instrument, and usually those knobs will, when you pull them, that's called a stop. When you pull the stop, that usually accesses one row of pipes. There are some stops that do different things, but usually it's one row of pipes, and one row of pipes is a rank. And so if an organ has 66 ranks, that's 66 different rows of pipes that you, and each row will sound different, and you'll have a mixture of principal pipes, which are, what you think of when you hear like big grand organ sound. You also have flutes and strings as well. Those are obviously usually the quieter stops. And then you can also have solo voices. Almost all organs will have at least one trumpet, solo voice. A lot of the newer ones will have oboes, clarinets. Some of them are electronic and can generate some of them that way. But yeah, so it's always so much fun to play big instruments. And what's great about the organ is that the community is very small, and every organ is different. And so if you go around places and you go into a church or a cathedral, concert hall, whatever, and you happen to encounter the organist, usually they'll let you play the instrument because they know that if they did the same thing in another church or concert hall, that they would also want to get to play. And so I've done that. I've played at the church that Ben Franklin was a member of back in Philadelphia. And when I was in Australia, I wandered into a church in the downtown area and struck up a conversation with the organist, and 3 minutes later I was on the instrument. So it's always a ton of fun, and something that I love to do. And I love to make the building shake.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. The church that I'm actually a member of, which is on the East Coast, actually has a 238 rank organ. So it's pretty big, and it's always a pleasure to get to hear that. So that's a neat one.
You guys are outranking each other.
So I don't have to.
Did you ever, before they changed the Crystal Cathedral, sold it to the Catholic Church?
I've never been to the Crystal Cathedral. It's on my list though. The AGO, the American Guild of Organists, had a local convention there a couple of years ago, and I wasn't able to attend, which I was very sad about. But yeah.
Well, they purchased the Crystal Cathedral and pulled out the pews to put in the knee whatever you call them, the kneeling areas, and I guess sent off they have like four separate, I don't know what you call them, seats for the organist, I guess, to move around to, or I don't know exactly how it all works, but it was very impressive, and I guess the Catholic Church can afford to do all the reconditioning that it needed, and wow, yeah. So
yeah, I'm not familiar with that particular instrument.
Well, I know they said that the big deal, they had like angels trumpets. So I guess that's a special feature, which was very impressive. Right. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, this is really, and Mason also, I see, okay, the clients that you've written for, Pacific Symphony Orchestra, and so as far as the instruments too, did you say that you do play certain instruments, or have you always, give us a little more on what all do you play?
Well, by trade, I'm a percussionist.
Okay.
So yeah, that's really been my main instrument, and it's really the one that I'm by far the most technically proficient in. And I do have some other stuff that I like mess around with at the house, like like some novelty instruments. Notably, I've got some stuff like here, let me quick example. This is a Yamaha Vinova, which I got over the pandemic. This is not. I can't actually play this. I've been trying to, but I can't actually play it.
What would it get to play it? Do you need instruction or what?
A little bit. I also just need to practice it more because
okay.
I haven't really touched it much.
Your marimba.
I just really need a lot more time on it to get. But it's stuff like that. I got like a pocket trumpet, in my room. I've got a melodica around here. It's interesting things like that.
Tell us about your marimba.
Oh yeah, I got a marimba in my basement. This is a fairly recent addition. It's a full 5-octave. I've had it for, let's see, how many months now?
It's October, right?
Yeah, you're right. So it's been about, October. And it's been great to have an instrument here in the house. It's a pretty solid instrument too. There's only like a couple minor issues with it, but all in all, it's not that bad of an instrument. Recording it though can be a little bit troublesome because one, it's big, but two, also because there are a couple pipes that have some vibration issues below it. Yes.
So you will not be bringing that with you out to California.
Oh no, I will. I will.
Oh, you will. You really
Yes.
will. Oh wow, good. You got room for that, huh?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Do you have a lion's jaw?
What, Jess?
Because at the Boston Symphony, we heard, was it Mayer's, some of his pieces, and they shook the lion's jaw.
Oh, you're talking about an actual lion's jaw. As
Or
an
maybe
instrument?
it was a donkey jaw. I don't know. It was something that was an animal's head and the teeth.
Mason, does that
rattled.
sound familiar to you?
I mean, yeah,
As-
actually, kinda.
Well, I didn't know that.
I don't actually have one of those. It'd be kind of, I mean, honestly, it's more that is the ultimate novelty because not only do I not have one of those, I've never actually been a part of an ensemble that's had one of those, and I've never encountered a piece that has had one of those ever. So, like, it is beyond a novelty.
So then you've heard of it.
I have heard of it, but I wouldn't say it's particularly useful.
Right.
Janice, how did that figure into what you heard? When was that played?
I was at a performance. I say a lot of performances like at the Boston Symphony and other places before they have the performance also at the Music Center. They have an hour before where those people who are in the audience who are curious to know about the novelties of the piece and so forth, why the composer wrote it, what is unusual. And yes, we were there early, and someone gave a speech about it. Now, my cousin is the percussionist in the Fort Wayne Orchestra, and somehow my students were doing Hansel and Gretel, and I said, "Is that true that you play as a percussionist? You play the cuckoo, because the cuckoo is in Hansel and Gretel." And he said yes, and then he played for me what he played.
I have an instrument from Africa that is rattle made out of goat's teeth.
Wow.
Oh, that's very
And Haydn wrote something called a toy symphony. And one of the instruments, it's like well, now you can get them a plastic bird and you fill it with water and you blow.
Like bubbles.
That instrument is in Haydn's toy symphony.
Oh, how interesting.
Thank you.
So, I mean, there's a lot of instruments not used in Western music, but they're used in African music or indigenous music. And that doesn't mean that they're a novelty instrument, because in Africa, they're not going to go around with a tuba or a synthesizer.
Right. They talk
You know,
about the evolution of music for what was
And it's
available.
not just an evolution, it's a different style.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
A different style.
Yeah.
What they had
Not
available.
that Western music has become so evolved that we're better than others. It's a different style. Indian music has different instruments.
Right.
You know, it depends on what culture you are in.
Right.
Yeah.
There used to be the California Traditional Music Society that when the organizers got sick, it's no longer available, but it was a festival, a weekend festival, and you could go out there and do things and get some of these odd instruments and learn how to play them.
Well,
This
the
is actually
Chinese-
an interesting topic, I think. When you talk about, I was talking about the evolution of music, where human evolution, what they had available for instruments. You know, someone picks up a lion's jaw and think that makes an interesting sound, and also
Well, they have to have it dead and dried.
well, I'm sure that happens, but yes. See,
Well,
this is
my
good.
my
can you
uncle,
guys-
Uncle Norman played the in Chicago Chicago Symphony Orchestra for 40 years, but he wrote a book about the something brothers, and what the history of the French horn is. It used to be the Alpine horn, which you had to have a good 20 feet around you to be able, well, you had to be out in the mountains. So then that could be done without running into people or and so forth. And they decided to curve it. Go ahead.
Yeah, just sort of building off that, just to quickly talk about there. Once it got to the point that it's still and yeah, it does have origins the Alpine horn. And by the way, you can still get Alpine horns today. But when they actually did curve it to use it for hunting, that was primary thing. They didn't have valves back then. Valves wouldn't really be a thing until the 19th century. And so what would happen is that if you see old horn music, it'll say horn in E, horn in B flat, horn in C sharp or whatever. Or that's because you had to take out the crook, which was the main giant pipe in it, and then replace it with a whole bunch of different crooks to get the different keys. And so you would effectively have to take the instrument apart and put it back together every single time you wanted to change keys with it. And so once valves came around, that became obsoleted, but you could still buy what are known as natural horns today. And they're actually very fascinating because, you know, they play all along the harmonic series and they have a somewhat unique sound with everything. And you know, interestingly, the modern horn is actually kind of a combo of two of those instruments, that being the B flat and F horn. And however, a lot of professionals use what's known as the triple horn, which also has an additional high B flat side to get more of the upper register. However, there's also the Vienna horn, which is common in Austria, which is just the, I believe, just the B flat side. And it has valves. And that also has a very distinctively different sound. However, that's really only common in Austria and southern Germany. So there's everything you ever will need to know about the French horn.
Can you guys put a link to the podcast in the chat for anybody who's interested?
Yes.
Thanks.
Religions use different instruments also, right?
Yeah, like Faith just mentioned in Judaism, the ram's horn, definitely.
Well, certainly, and sound effects and mood music. You know, my daughter met the person who wrote the score for Pirates of the Caribbean. And, you know, that is just so moving. And the Game of Thrones is moving too. And I can't remember the music for that. The one about the girl where they have to go and survive, and she took the place of her sister. And what was that one?
The Hunger Games. The
There you
Hunger
go.
Games.
Yeah. And that's one nice thing that with the sound effects.
Right.
But yeah, I look forward to being able to go back to the movies, and I hope they come up with live performances. I just Comedy and Magic Club. I miss that. We used to get everybody to go on their birthdays, and I'd go with them too. So this is are we getting a preview for what's next month?
Yes, next month is Faith and her daughter Naomi.
Oh, good.
Yes,
Okay.
and I will wait. No,
I'll
I will
send this
not be
to-
available. I will not be available. Anyway, Faith will send everything to Van, and we'll get some publicity out soon, because we want to include about also her announcement for the 13th of this month of her program. So
Good.
yes.
Well, I appreciate all your hard work, and Sharon and I were able to have a little brunch, and sorry we were a little late, but
and join us.
we made it, and I think it's always a good idea if you invite a friend to do something before or after, or I was going to try to get through to what's her name, but we're substitute teachers, and so we're on the last week. Yeah, what a year, you know. On March the 13th, I checked in the office. They gave me a big stack of papers, and I was supposed to hand out about 20 pages to students and tell them they were supposed to do that for the next 2 weeks. We thought we were only going to be out for 2 weeks. Well, it's been over a year. Over a year. And then on the 16th of March, we were told it was going to be 2 weeks. And then we were told that everything was going to be closed for an indefinite period. And you know that some schools have just started to go back in the last month or so.
Right.
And
It's been strange, but we're coming out the other end of it. So, you know, thank goodness.
coming out the other end. Well, yeah.
Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the cooks for all the good DNA and good genes. Although I'm going to look it up, I think there may be a law against having that much talent in one family.
Well, they probably came over on the Mayflower. Alan, did you come over on the Mayflower?
He had one ancestor.
Wow, see?
Over on the main.
Yeah. One of the answers.
I wouldn't be surprised. Probably was the captain.
Captain Cook. Oh, there was a Captain Cook, wasn't there?
Yes, there was.
Pocahontas. Absolutely.
Oh.
Oh, supposedly she saved his life.
Oh.
I think it was Captain Hook. Captain Hook, not Captain Hook.
I think we're veering off here a little.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's
Captain Cook was a historical figure who explored the Pacific, so he was a real person.
Once you know, there's always a spoiled
See,
He's not a relative.
Isn't he the one that was mutinied against? I'm not sure. Anyway.
That's Captain Bligh. Captain
Captain
was
Bligh.
killed by the Native Hawaiians because he antagonized the Hawaiians. So
I should know that. I lived in Hawaii. I knew there was some connection. Yeah.
The monuments at Kealakekua Bay on the Big Island, and this is a long story, but basically he kidnapped a Hawaiian chief, which is a bad idea, and then it didn't end well for him. So yeah.
I knew there was some. I knew there was some type of mutiny.
Yeah.
Wow. Does anyone else have any other questions or anything for Matthew or Mason or Alan or no?
Alan, what did we hear about Alan's new book or next book or?
We have earlier in the
Oh, I'm sorry.
So Alan, how exciting is that to have your grandson record it? That's got to have
Yeah,
been
that was
absolutely
great. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the book is East of the Wall, and it came out actually about a year ago. And when I started thinking about Audible, we thought, well, you know, Matthew has a really nice voice. Let's get him involved. And so he recorded it, and as you know, he's been recording other books since then. And he does a really bang up job because he can do men and women and different languages. And so whatever you need, he can do it.
So Matthew, are you also an independent contractor, or just everything now is through ACX?
Yeah, I'm an independent contractor basically.
Also, okay, more base, or so you, but you have that option that you know, if you wanted, you can go to them and say, okay, what do you have that?
Oh, I know.
Wow,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
that is so exciting.
I know what I was going to ask.
Are you unmuted? Yeah.
You're unmuted, Janet. Nope, now you're muted. Unmute yourself, Janice.
Janice is muted.
Yeah.
There.
There you go.
Matthew, any chance we can have a little sampling of Figaro, Figaro, Figaro?
You're muted, Matt.
I don't think it's a good idea for me to sing over over Zoom, but
there may be, unless one stop the recording, there may be copyright issues here.
Oh well, okay.
Well,
You have to
well,
have if
also-
it wants to blow us away or not. That's okay.
If it's copyright.
And
Oh, well,
Matthew,
he's
what are your
already
rates
signed up,
typically for the
sequestered.
audiobooks?
what my current rate is $200 per finished hour.
Whoa. What's your
Worth it.
average?
Very nice.
The average audiobook length is for a good sized novel 7, 8, 9 hours, somewhere in there. Grandpa's book was 9 hours and 10 minutes, I believe it was.
Did you give him a discount?
Well, that was so the rate is also reflective of the fact that I've now gotten quite a bit of experience, and I've gotten hopefully better at narrating, and so I did not have that high of a rate when I did Grandpa's book.
Wow. So are you going to be able to fit in this also when you go back to school, or?
Yeah, I hope to.
Good.
One of the things that I was looking for in the USC graduate housing is to try to figure out the buildings that had walk-in closets so that I could set up a little recording studio. So fingers crossed for that.
Or commandeer if you have a private bathroom, whatever, you know. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we are going to be very interesting to follow, Matthew, both you, Mason, to follow your guys' careers, and again, to meet you in person when you get out here. Something to really look forward to. So thank you so much. This has been such a treat for us to inject some young blood also into Southwest manuscripters / Surfwriters. So this is great. So I'm not sure who is recording this, either William?
That's me. That's
All
me.
right.
I have it.
So it's your call then, whenever. But again, thank you so much. This has meant so much to us. So hope you got a good recording from it.